session called Moving from Performative Ally to Inclusive Leader with Karlyn Percil and LaFawn Davis. Karlyn is the CEO of KDPM Consulting Inc. and LaFawn is the Vice President of Diversity, Inclusion, and Belonging at Indeed. I will not launch into their bios because these guys need all the time that they can get.
Thank you so much, Heather.
Thanks, Heather.
Thanks, everyone, for being here today. LaFawn and I, we're just going to dive right in because we know that you're here to get all the tips and tricks from LaFawn. So let's dive right in. Allyship.
Let's do it.
It's a term for this year. It has come up so many times. A lot of people are using it as a title, as a badge of honor, but they're still stuck in this notion of performative allyship. They're posting on social media. They see it as something that's, hey, look at me, I'm doing something. They have statements going out from different companies. What is your definition of allyship? Especially you're in the space, you're practicing, you're seeing it in terms of what's working and what's not. Can you just share with us what it is? And also from your perspective, what isn't it?
Yeah, I'm really glad you asked that question. And you're right. I think during especially the summer of this year, when a lot of civil unrest, Black Lives Matter happened, we had a lot of people just, oh my gosh, you're racist now. Or we had influencers on Instagram going to protest just so they could take pictures. We had billboards, we had statements of solidarity. We had Congress in the US in kente cloths kneeling, all the things we didn't ask for that actually make a difference. So one of the things you said was key. People are using the word ally or allyship as an identity. It is not an identity. It's not who you are. It's a lifelong process of building relationships based on trust, consistency, accountability with marginalized individuals. It's about oppression and the oppressed. It's not just, hey, I'm an ally as an identity. What it has come to mean is just, I support you. I support you if you're not like me. Oftentimes I will talk about intersectionality because no one's a binary identity. I'm Black, I'm a woman, I'm queer, I'm of a mature age. I'm a mother of an adult child, I'm fabulous, I have a lot of layers. And so I could be technically an ally of anyone that's not like me. I could be an ally of somebody who's white or a male or straight, but it's supposed to go further than support, right? And so I like to take people through an allyship framework that is allyship, since it's come to mean like, I support you, and I might have a sign in the back cheering you on, through advocacy. Advocacy is much more active, right? When you advocate for someone, you're utilizing your own voice, you're recognizing your own privilege in order to make change, but also moving that through to being an accomplice, which has a breaking and entering kind of connotation, but that's okay, because accomplices are helping break down the systems of oppression that were put into place long ago. And I actually love what Alicia Garza says, who's one of the co-founders of Black Lives Matter. She actually says, let's move into being co-conspirators, because co-conspirators are in it with you. They take the same punishment, they go to jail with you. It's the same kind of thing. You are in this together. And I think that's where we want to move people through past, I support, but I'm not going to do anything to actually damage my own privilege or interrupt the power that I have, but I support you. And move people through action to actually help marginalized individuals.
I love what you said. You gave so many key points, but 3 things that really stuck out to me is the trust and consistency, and fully understanding what is allyship about and what does it mean to be an ally. And if you don't have that trust with the community you would like to be an ally with or for, then you're really just recentering your own narrative and your own experience. And again, if it's, for example, a white person who's advocating, then you're recentering the oppressive structures and the practices that have been, marginalizing groups for so many years. And that piece around trade-off, that trade in something, if you are a co-conspirator, then you're willing to go to jail. You're willing to do more than just holding up a sign that says I support. One of the things we focus on, and our framework in KDPM around allyship is very similar. You have to identify what you're advancing. What are you advocating for and on our behalf? Is it a institutional practice? Is it an actual system? What exactly is that? And also acknowledging the fact that, to your point, you will have to trade something off Because when it comes to power and privilege, something needs to be traded in order for you to create equity for other groups. I want to talk about, psychological safety, because when we talk about oppression and oppressive structures, and everyone is out there wanting to be an ally, and they are reharming those who are currently being harmed by the current oppressive structures within various institutions. So I want to talk a little bit about that trauma, that racial trauma, that reharming, but also you have taken a very unique and one that's not popular, but I think it should be, in my opinion, approach to centering the racialized group of Black individuals within your workplace. What have you done that's so different with psychological safety, and why did you decide to go that route?
Yeah, thank you, Karlyn. So psychological safety is super important for this entire space, right? Without psychological safety, diversity cannot thrive.
Yeah.
And for those of you listening, psychological safety is the absence of fear. You can use your voice without fear of negative consequences. You can ask questions. You can push against the status quo. And it is actually the key factor in creating high-performing teams. Yeah. So at Indeed, I think what we recognize is that our employees are our greatest asset. Without employees, they aren't building the things, they aren't selling the things, right? We wouldn't have a company. Our employees are our greatest assets. And so when you center the trauma that employees go through and help them heal, you're actually helping them become even better employees and more endeared to your company. We're all going through a state of trauma, all of us, especially this year, right? And so it is, especially in the technology industry, Karlyn, we have told people to bring their whole self to work. Oh. And that is a lie. It's a lie because companies are not equipped to handle anyone's whole self, right? You see what you see today, but you might not want to see my whole self. So when something like this occurred, we, especially on the rise of Black Lives Matter this year, we actually centered the populations that were in pain for 2020 in totality. Our Asian population with xenophobia, our Black population with Black Lives Matter, anything that was really going on. And we do things called brave spaces, which is allowing employees to share their stories, because I believe storytelling is a powerful agent for change. And then also healing spaces. So we have a trauma expert and an epigenetics expert who walks through trauma with employees to take them through the phases to be able to heal from that trauma, because that's what this is, right? Civil unrest, racism, all of the isms and phobias, that's trauma. And so helping employees heal through that creates a space of psychological safety where they can bring more of themselves in an authentic way to work.
I love that. And, you touched on something that's so crucial and so key. We talk about, an employer setting up an employee for success by when you start that new job, you get your new laptop, you get your sign on, you get, your badge, your security badge. What about my psychological safety care kit, right? Because again, you coming into your onboarding, you were told to bring your whole self to work. And when you walk through that door, because it is a square door, and let's say I'm a round person, I'm already damaged because just trying to get through the door, I'm actually hurting myself. And I think it's something, especially HR professionals and individuals who are people leaders, it's extremely important to center the psychological safety, especially for groups who have not had the privilege. Because when I think about my 20+ career in the tech industry, in the financial industry on Bay Street, I did not have that psychological safety. I tried to find it. I created, a Black Employees Network. I brought women of color together for us to have conversations. And we did start having conversations, but it didn't thrive in the workplace. Why? Because I did not have that support from the C-suite and from senior leadership and management. What would you say to the CEOs and the people leaders, the HR leaders, especially organizations that are mostly white, who say, hey, but I have a psychological safety strategy, right? And it's we've had it for years and it's working. What would you say to them in terms of what needs to change right now, especially in this pivotal moment?
Yeah, I would say to them, ask your employees if it's working. Right? It's actually phenomenal if you do have a strategy in place. But I would say do a little bit of sentiment analysis to understand how your employees are actually feeling, because what it's connected to, and Karlyn, what you described is a sense of belonging.
Yes.
If employees don't feel like they belong, then they actually don't have psychological safety. They don't feel like they can actually bring who they are in whatever form. to work. And so I would say a strategy is great, but if you're not checking in with your employees to see how they feel, do they feel like they belong? Do they have people and communities where they feel connected? And this isn't about identity politics, right? I shared all of my layers. I don't need to be surrounded by everyone who looks or acts or identifies as I do. I need to feel like I'm supposed to be there. That could be because we're all striving towards the same mission. It could be because I'm in my team, in my office. I have that sense of belonging and I'm supposed to be here. I don't feel like a round person going through a square door. And so I would say strategies are great, but if you're not putting them into practice, and here's the kicker, if you're not role modeling, psychological safety, if you're not showing your employees that you care, if they feel like they belong, if you have your head in the sand and think, as long as we just keep going as business as usual, and we stay apolitical and we stay non-controversial and we don't talk about anything else, then everybody's on an even playing field.
Yeah.
But that's not life.
Yeah.
We aren't all starting from the same place. We don't all have the same experiences or backgrounds. And so that's the whole point of equity, right? Is making sure that we recognize those differences and start to create spaces where we all feel like we belong, no matter where we're coming from.
Exactly. And I love that you brought in that equity piece. And I love quoting, Trevor Wilson. He talks about human equity. We need to get to human equity. And going back to what you said, like, imagine both of us are employees within an organization. And yes, we both identify as Black women, but my experience will not be the same as yours. So again, that assumption that, well, we have a strategy and it works for all Black individuals is such a flawed concept. We have to create space to invite that narrative and invite that feedback, so that, again, if it doesn't work for one, then it means that there is still work to be done. And also organizations need to understand that equity also, like allyship, is a lifelong journey, right? It's not something that's achieved within an annual year or a quarter, but it's that feedback loop needs to be constant, and there need to be that psychological safety so that employees can feel safe enough to give that feedback as well. Now, we know we have so many organizations at different parts of the journey, and I want to leave a little bit of time for us to maybe take in one or two questions. I really love using that continuous start methodology, because some people already started, they probably have a strategy, there's a feedback loop, and they're going. There are some who they haven't started yet. They're like baby steps. They're like, LaFawn, I'm literally just looking into the room and I don't know where to go. But there are some people who are doing, some companies, who are doing things that are causing more harm. If you can share for us within that concept, what can companies continue to do, start to do, and stop doing in order to ensure that they're on the right pathway when it comes to building equitable culture or a culture of belonging in the workplace?
Yeah, so I would say, if you haven't started, if you are within a company that hasn't recognized what is happening around you, it's happening everywhere. And like I said, 2020 is the year of trauma for us all, whether that's the pandemic, civil unrest, economic uncertainty, murder hornets just made it to the US. It could be anything. Yeah, they have. So it could be a lot of things that you are traumatized for. If you have small children at home, bless you. My child is an adult, and I cannot imagine what parents are going through right now, having to school their children and raise them and work in the same space. So we're all at that place. And if you have not started to recognize what is happening for people around you, then I would say this is a great time to educate yourself. The worst thing that leaders can do in an organization is put it on the marginalized people to educate them on how they are oppressed. That actually is causing harm to the communities that are marginalized. So take the time. There's lots of stuff. There's this thing called Google. You can actually do a lot of things. At Indeed, we actually put out a manager guide because managers were confused. What do I do? What do I say? One manager came up to me and was like, I have a Black person and a gay person on my team. What do I do? And I was like, okay, welcome. And also, there are lots of things you could read. There are books, there are podcasts, there are documentaries. There are articles that you can read. There are people that you can follow on social media, like you, Karlyn. There's lots of things you can do to educate yourself before you launch into any action that you need to take. So that's step one, if you haven't started at all. Now, if you are in the process of doing something, you've got a plan in place, you have a strategy, actually check in. Don't ask them to educate you, or don't ask them to do the things, but check in with the communities that you intend to help. Right? What performative, as you pointed out, it centers your own experience. It centers maybe your pain and understanding a racist society, a sexist society, whatever it is that you have come to understand. Don't center your own experience over it. And instead of just having a plan without the input of the communities, it's good to partner with them. Are we actually helping, or are we further harming by maybe putting more on these communities than they already have to carry? And if you have only done performative things, this is where we get into stop. If you've only done performative things, if you've only done the statement of solidarity, if you've only sent an email to your employee base one good time, if you put a black square on Instagram on that one day and thought you did something, that's what you need to stop doing. It's understandable if you want to let people know the kind of company you are, and that's okay. So if you had a statement, that is good. We had a statement at Indeed, but if you don't think we're actually doing the action and putting in the work to make changes, because that's what this is all about. It's about long-term systemic change. We didn't get here in a year. It's not going to be fixed in a year. So the best thing that we can do is keep going and keep trying and keep pushing to change these power dynamics and the places of privilege that people come from.
Oh, I love that. I hope everyone's taking notes, and they're making a note of the things that they need to walk away with and to operationalize. I really love what you said around, checking in with the partners, because a huge part of, being an authentic ally, and I use the word authentic because if you understand that it is a lifelong journey and it's not something that happens overnight. And coming from a place of authenticity, meaning that you genuinely want to help, you will spend the time to learn and you will spend the time to partner. And one thing I wanted to point out, there's a lot of, in terms of stop doing, I'd like to expand on that. There are some organizations or groups or individuals who are centering the experience and they're focusing only on the harm that has been done. But I want to remind everyone, there are 2 E's when it comes to doing this work. The first E is, yes, our experience, whether it's our leadership experience, lived experience, et cetera, et cetera. And the other E I don't want people to forget is the expertise. Right? We are brilliant at what we do. So while you're focusing on the experience, don't forget, how am I leveraging, or have I leveraged enough the experiences of different individuals within the Black community? And I think it's something that needs to be said, because one of the top things I'm hearing trends in terms of speaking to clients and speaking to different groups is that the advancement, that glass ceiling, that we can't go beyond it. It is something that needs to pay attention to. So while you're documenting and partnering with, remember to partner on the entire, parts. What makes us who we are, not just our experiences, but also our expertise, so that we can bring that to the table as well.
Absolutely. I'll do 2 T's. Don't just focus on the trauma, focus on the talent. Right? It's and as leaders who are, or even rising leaders who have joined the WNORTH conference, think about, how are you breaking down things systemically within your own organization? Sometimes fixing the world feels too big. It's too big, right? I can't change the entire world today. But what you can do is change your company. And the way that you do that, focusing on what we just talked about, Karlyn, is looking at how you hire people. Are you screening people in or screening people out? Are you looking at people with non-traditional backgrounds who's going to add to your space? Or are you just looking at the same profiles that you normally do, and you have the same people entering your organization? At Indeed, we say yesterday's best. Well, it comes from Nolan, who's our chief revenue officer. Yesterday's best is not good enough for tomorrow's Indeed. So you shouldn't want to look the same and be the same as you are right now to be more successful. But then how are you moving people through the organization? Are they getting promoted at the same rate as everybody else? Are you giving people opportunity, like growth opportunities as well? Or are you hiring, diversity in one area of the business, in lower paying jobs? Do you see people at the C-suite? Do you see people in leadership, right? Because representation matters. Yes. And so that's a way that folks on this in this event can actually affect their company is to make sure that your systems have reduced bias, it's removing barriers to entry, and it's focusing on making sure that everyone can thrive, regardless of what they're coming in with, because all of that is additive to your organization. It makes you better.
It does. It does. Now, in order for all of that to work, I've heard different stories and different models. I'd love to get your thoughts on what is the most, I guess you can say stable or the most effective structure to ensure that organizations actually ensure that the D&I strategy actually is successful. So, for example, I've heard people like, well, no, we just have a committee. Some people like, yeah, and some folks are like, well, it's everybody's job, so it reports up to HR, and we deal with it that way. What is, in your opinion, or what you've seen also through your work, is the most effective structure to ensure that this is a priority?
Yeah, so I get it, and a committee is great to get buy-in, right? Especially to pull in leaders from across the organization and make them accountable. That accountability has to be there. If you are lucky enough to have a me or a my team in your organization, it cannot be just a program that sits in the corner of HR. It's far beyond just an HR program. Oftentimes, DEI, D&I, DIMB, there's all these acronyms. They're the smallest teams in a company. Sometimes it's a team of one. And I would say that's the best way for you to make sure that your program is not successful. Anything that is not resourced and not budgeted is not a priority for the company. Full stop. Full stop. What DIMB, diversity, inclusion, equity, all of the things need to become is part of your entire organization. On my team, we're focused on accessibility. We're focused on product. We're focused on our job seekers, not just our employees. We have amazing, we call them IRGs, which is inclusion resource groups. So the same thing as employee resource groups and business resource groups, et cetera. And so, it's got to be a multi-tiered strategy. It cannot just be a group that meets once a quarter to talk about how great they're doing. This has to live throughout the whole organization. And if it doesn't start at the top, it is not going to happen. It is great to have grassroots and wonderful to have employees who work on a lot of things. They volunteer and they give some of their time. But if you don't actually have top-down role modeling with the grassroots support and impact, then you're actually not going to move the needle at all. It just becomes a good conversation to have. It becomes something you can put on your website that you're doing, but are you actually making change? And if you find that you're not, then you need to do something different, and probably having a mechanism of support full-time, someone who does this work, who can advocate for people that need to be advocated for, who can influence leaders, who can actually build this out so it seeps into your entire business, is probably the way to go. I just know some companies are really small and they're not there yet, but we've moved past the business case for diversity.
Yeah, and there's a very icky feeling about the business case for diversity, because again, you're saying that you're justifying my humanness, right? Which in itself, again, when we look at white supremacy and systemic racism, you are simply re-embedded. I think organizations need to do away with the whole business case, in my personal opinion. Because if you're asking me to business case humanity, then you're saying that, well, the majority group, whiteness as a culture, and if the majority group within your organization are white folks, then you're saying that, oh, we got them, they're good. But for the rest, let's justify why they need to belong in the organization. And that in itself is a red flag. So I really love that you touched on that. If it's not a budget line item, then again, it's not a priority, and you are, and I think people are afraid to say that, but I would say if it's not a budget item, you don't have, the staff is not a priority, it's not role model from the top down, you are sustaining and re-embedding oppressive structure and using white supremacy as your culture within the organization. I think we need to get to a space in corporate culture where we see that, so that people understand what equity looks like, and it is not that. We can keep talking, LaFawn.
Well, I think the other thing, Karlyn, that you just touched on was intention or impact.
Yes.
right? So a lot of companies will have a committee, a group, maybe a one-person show, and be like, but our intention is good. But what impact are you making?
Yes.
Right? It's budget over intention. It's resourcing over intention. It's action over intention. We can no longer be in the place of well-meaning, right? As long as you start with well-meaning people, no, because well-meaning doesn't go far enough, right? So where is the impact? Where's the action? And I think that's where people need to move to.
The action. I would say final words. It's all about action, as you have heard from LaFawn here, and in the middle of our discussion, it's all about action. And allyship is something that you work on. I really love the reminder around trust and consistency. And the only way to continue to build trust and consistency is through action. And again, keeping that feedback loop open so you can hear from the groups that you're trying, you're given equity-seeking groups that you're giving that hand up. You will hear from us whether or not it's working. It's not up to the head of HR or the CEO to say it's working, especially if you're looking at this through the lens of, whiteness as the norm. LaFawn, thank you so much. Any final words before we say goodbye?
I would just say, well, Karlyn, you and I are BFFs now, but I would just say to everyone that's listening, start somewhere.
Yes.
Start somewhere and just don't stick your head in the sand.
I love that. And for me, I would say, head over to whether it's my website or LinkedIn. We do have some strategies. We actually have a race, racism, and equity toolkit with different, reflection points, looking at where you can start, what you can do, and that will be shared with all of you as well. LaFawn, thank you so much for being here today. Heather, thanks for having us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Karlyn. Thank you, LaFawn. I am so glad to be the one that brought you two together, because I think that some of the work that you are both doing, one in Canada and one in the US, is, and globally, both of them, is incredible work. And what I've been saying, over the last few months is that inclusivity is our new way of leadership. It is not just one session. It is not just one thing. It is coming exactly how you said, LaFawn, from the top. We need to make change in all aspects of our business. And this was an incredible session. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And we are about to go into a networking break. So this is, to be clear, this is not a session. This is your time. So we sent out some tips this morning. Check your email on connecting with others. Make sure you're a part of the platform, which is our virtual networking group. And just wanted to lead you through our breakout talks. There are a couple of concurrent sessions that are happening at the same time. So you need to go into your agenda, pick which ones that you want to view, and press play to get those activated. And you must be there on the start time. If you miss them, you can go to the virtual platform to check them out. But thank you for joining us, and we will see you soon.